98.1 AM, 1220, and hometown.com. Hello, and welcome to the Ask Brien radio show. I am Traci DeForge, and it's been a minute since I've been here, Jen. I'm so excited to be back.
It's good to have you back. I've missed you. We need the female balance, so it's good to have you.
Yes, well, thank you for that. And speaking of female balance, we are all about the estrogen today because we have such a fantastic guest. But I would be remiss if I didn't explain to everybody who doesn't already know why Ask Brien is spelled with an E. And, so with all estrogen taken into consideration, our number one E is always you, Jen.
You're very sweet. Thank you.
Yes, and of course that leads us to why we're all here, and that is for all of us collectively, this entrepreneur community of ours, getting educated with our experts. Did you like how I did that?
That was slick.
Yes, I have a lot of empathy for your ear because I know sometimes it doesn't go so smoothly.
Oh my gosh, when he does the yelling thing, I don't want to encourage him, but I know he'll cry if I don't keep the mic up. So
yes, but that is also because he lacks empathy, and
That's
we're not
true.
talking about him. We would say that about our fondly adoring co-host,
Certainly.
our host, Brien / Peter, if he were here. But he's off jaunting around Singapore right now, so it's just the ladies in charge.
That's good. We need a break.
All right. Well, so that we can get to the heart of the matter, and I actually chose the word heart for a reason because I am about to introduce you to one of the most heart-centered and heart-filling and heart-filled persons that I literally personally know, both personally and professionally. And you're going to see why I say that when we bring her on. Aransas, welcome to the Ask Brien radio show.
Thank you, Traci.
Well, I'm so happy you're here because we get a chance to, I'm just going to go ahead and let the audience know that Aransas and I have the chance to connect fairly frequently because I have so much admiration and respect for everything that it is that you do. And I'm also so blessed that I get to call you not only just my friend and my colleague, but also my business coach, my leadership coach, my producer podcast team leadership coach. And we just happen to work together on the most fantastic podcast, award-winning, I might add, Uplifters Podcast that you host. So that's my intro of you, but you might want to give us a more lengthy bio of your own for the audience to know all about your absolute fantasticness.
Aw, thank you, my absolutely fantastic friend. It's apt, I guess, that introduction, because really the Uplifters Podcast was, for me, initially designed so that I could learn from the women who inspire me. And so I created that podcast as a way to connect with as many inspiring women as I could find through my own network. And it was women like you that I wanted to talk to, women who are doing big, brave things in the world, who are leading with courage, who are facing obstacles and learning their way through them to greater strength, and then to turn those all into insights, mindsets, and tools that we can all collectively benefit from. And so our show has sort of a unique format in that I talk to one woman each week, and then she nominates a woman that inspires her, who nominates a woman who inspires her. And I've gotten to talk to incredible trailblazers like Catherine Switzer, the first woman who ever ran the Boston Marathon, and so many people who really have broken tremendous ground, either by being the first woman in their field to do something. I've talked to a ton of change makers who saw big problems out in the world and decided that they couldn't sit around and wait for somebody else to solve the problem. And so they figured out, often without much permission or a feeling of readiness, how to solve that problem. And then I'd say the third category of women that we talk to quite often is people who decided that something wasn't working in their own lives personally. And those personal transformers really are some of the most powerful stories of all, because you get to hear how they completely turn their lives around. And so it has really been the greatest joy of my life to partner with you, specifically with your amazing producer podcast team, to create this storytelling vehicle that for me feels like maybe one of the most vital and important things any of us could listen to right now. I feel like we're so bombarded by bad news and things that scare us and worry us and put us in this constant state of fear, and the Uplifters is the antidote to that. It is, at this point, 99 bonkers, inspiring, real-life stories of people who can give us hope, who prove to us that change is possible.
And, and it does really, the magic of that really does start with your, again, heart-centered approach to what it is that you're doing. And that's one of the things that I just immediately connected with you on. When we actually met for the first time, you were a senior executive with Weight Watchers International, and I was doing a consulting project with the Global Innovation Team, and that's how we connected. And, we did some magical work even then that has ripple effects out into the world today. But tell us a little bit about your story and all of the uplifting things along the way of how you got started, not only in this passion for customer experience, strategy, leadership, motivation, all of the things. Has that just always been something you've been drawn to, or is it something that you grew into in your professional?
Yeah, I think probably like so many people, my professional journey has been a bit windy if I look at it moment by moment, but when I look back at it over time, it makes perfect sense. So I actually started my career. I got a master's degree in acting, thinking that I would do theater in New York City and that would be my career. But I wasn't super committed to that career path. I just knew that I loved human beings and I loved human behavior, and my entire life, all I wanted to talk about is why human beings do what they do. And so I moved to New York City after getting my master's degree in acting and kind of floated around doing theater and directing and producing and acting. And then I got this surprise gig teaching presentation skills to the coaches and executives at Weight Watchers. And one thing led to another, as it often does. And I ended up there for 18 years in a wide range of roles, as you said, in innovation, but all really in human-centered design and experience. And so whether it was working with our teams or our in-person teams, working domestically or globally, what I was always responsible for was bringing heart and humanity to an experience and really understanding human needs and designing experiences and solutions that gave people value for the time that they were spending with the company. And so I still do that, both in my podcast, but also very much so in my consulting work. So I currently work with a wide range of companies, from banking to healthcare to home buying to entertainment, to help them listen more deeply to what their customers genuinely care about and want and how they measure success. And then I help those companies create more meaningful experiences that deliver differentiated value by through a deep understanding of the customer and their needs, instead of sort of being led by, well, what does the company want? I help companies meet their goals by meeting their customers where they are.
I love that. And so a lot of people, when they're in the corporate world, especially the way things have been in the last, maybe decade, there are a lot of people who have what they reference as side hustles, or they start businesses on the side alongside their corporate trajectory. Did you operate a side business before you became a full-time entrepreneur, or did you just take the big leap all at once?
Well, I started getting educated and investing in my own learning journey while I was still in my corporate role. And so I did have like a very tiny sort of underinvested in side hustle while I was still there. But it was so tied to what I was doing in my corporate career. I was coaching coaches, coaching platforms for our company at that point. And so I was nurturing very quietly my own little coaching business in a very soft way. And so then when I got laid off 18 years in, there was kind of this moment of, oh, what do I do with my life now? And then the big question of, well, if I could be anything, what would I be? And because I'd already, during my corporate career, started investing and answering that question, I felt really open to not repeating the pattern I had been in, which was living within the corporate environment. Somebody yesterday I was talking to, I thought this was so hilarious. She was like, yeah, I feel like right now what everybody's doing is they're leaving the big organizations because they're like, I don't need corporate daddy anymore. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's such a funny concept because it is like a really like parental structure to exist within a corporate environment where you are very heavily parented and you live within this big home with lots of rules and lots of guidelines. And I think for a lot of us, it feels like it limits our personal expression or our ability to innovate and grow in the ways that we most need to. And so, because I had done that foundational work, I felt better prepared than I might have to say, okay, well, what if I were to really invest in something very different than the corporate home with corporate daddy that I grew up in.
Well, we are going to come right back to that topic after we take a break. You are listening to KHTS FM 98.1 AM 1220 and HometownStation.com. Welcome back to the Ask Brien radio show on KHTS FM 98.1 AM 1220 and HometownStation.com. We are just loving our conversation that we're having with you, Aransas, and where we left off before the break is we were talking about that transition between going from the corporate daddy corporate daddy America, which is so funny. I've never heard that expression the way you told it, but now I'm probably never going to forget it. And transitioning from that role and that hierarchy and that structure, that parental architecture, if you will, to being full-on entrepreneur. And one thing I know for sure, my own personal experience and also working with thousands of women entrepreneurs over the years, that takes a tremendous amount of courage. Would you agree?
I would, yeah, completely. And it's so interesting that you use that word specifically. Because as I said, when I started the Uplifters, and it was really, we were talking to purpose-led women, and one of the things that was most curious about there is like, okay, when you're doing really big work in the world, and this probably is actually true for any entrepreneur, the question becomes, how do you take care of yourself well enough that you can sustain your good work in the world? And so we spent a lot of time talking about that, but very quickly there was another core theme that emerged, and it actually kind of crystallized for me, not in an episode, but in talking to an audience member who said that she listened to the show, and I quote, because it was helping her raise courage capital to fund her dreams.
Oh, my God.
And I was
I love that.
What? Right? And because we all know every entrepreneur needs to raise capital But it's not just financial capital. We actually, probably even more vitally, because we can't raise the financial capital without it, we need to raise the courage capital. And so at that point, because I'm a researcher, I was like, oh my gosh, she's right. And so I kind of went back and I started to look back through those episodes and wanted to identify what the patterns were. Like, what are these women who are facing so many obstacles, who are coming up against so much resistance, who are being told no time and time again? What are they doing to enable them to keep going? And for me, it was like, you know, have you ever seen like a cartoon where they show, you know, like all the pieces of paper spread out across the room, and then something happens and like this wind comes through and all the pieces of paper end up stacked into one tidy pile? That was sort of what happened to me with this, because I started to see, excuse me, I started to see patterns emerging within these women. And again, as a researcher, that is like where my brain comes to life. And so for the last 6 months or so, I've actually been doing some very heavy synthesis to validate and more deeply understand what I'm calling the courage framework, which is essentially the key 7 skills that I see embodied in these 100 stories of these women that I've interviewed. And we're actually hitting our 100th episode 2 weeks from today, which is really exciting.
That is exciting.
Thank you. We have a really nice data set. And then I went back and I started looking at other research that has been done, randomized and other large-scale studies, and I started looking back at my own work and the many hundreds of women that I've gotten to coach one-on-one. And for me, it has just been so extraordinarily powerful to start to identify a set of skills to prioritize in my own life, because understanding that puts me in a position to be able to raise my courage capital when I need to. So can I share with you what I found?
I mean, if you didn't, I would be so disappointed, because I am literally, so impressed by all of this, and I still can't get over the whole courage capital. Like, that is so fabulous and so true. It's so much more, it's actually so much more important really than the financial capital, because you can't even really leverage and utilize your financial capital, if you were so fortunate to get that, if you don't have the courage to do what you need to do to act in integrity and grow your business and do all this, have the brave conversations. Like, the financial piece of capital, it's just only one small piece. So yes, please tell us what you found.
It's the result. It's the result of the courage, is how I see it.
Oh, yes, I love that. I love that.
Right? Like, you can't raise financial capital unless you raise courage capital.
You can't even raise your rates if you don't have courage capital.
No, you sure can't. You can't find a customer without courage capital.
Yeah.
You have to be able to say to the world, I'm doing something.
Yeah, I really feel like you're on to something here, and I'm really grateful that the Ask Brien platform gets to be one of the distribution points of this powerful message.
I'm so excited to talk to you about it, because you're somebody who so gets it, and you are somebody who has really seen the ins and outs of so many entrepreneurial journeys. And so I think on a much deeper level, you will understand this innately. And I think you'll be able to help me actually continue to expand some of these concepts. So yeah, I'm super thrilled to talk to you about them. So let me tell you about the framework, and then we can go from there. So I started with, of course, the framework is based in courage. So, and I think first and foremost, the pattern I see in these trailblazers and overcomers and uplifters is that they have a remarkable ability to convert the questions that we all ask into actions. And so where so many people get stuck asking themselves questions like, am I ready? Am I qualified? Do I have permission? These women take the more active question and say, how can I start? And instead of thinking 10 steps ahead, not that they're not strategic, but instead of thinking 10 steps ahead, they learn their way to their brilliance through action. So it is an experimental mindset, I think, that really sets them apart. The second is O, opt for progress over perfection, very much linked to that. So these aren't women until everything is perfect and all the answers are in place. They are people who move forward through imperfect action, who improve as they go. And because they get it. They know that perfect is the enemy of the done. And that done is where we start to build tiny steps that can ladder up. And I think, I've heard so many stories and I've seen so many examples of people who spend their lives living in regret. And right when you ask them what happened, they always say, well, it just never felt like the right time. And I remember somebody once saying to me, right? It was never the right. And I remember somebody saying to me years ago, this is like the first time, honestly, that I thought about this idea was we were in college and one of my friends and his girlfriend made a baby. And
it wasn't the right time.
It wasn't the right time. And we were all like, ooh, that's exciting. And the girl's mother said, well, babies happen. And if anybody waited until the perfect time to have a baby, nobody'd have a baby. I was like, you know what?
What a great mom, right? I mean, that's like such a great mom. Coming from someone who's adopted, by the way, like that is real. That's a really good mom for supporting that person. Absolutely.
It's huge. It's huge. But I think we are fed so many lies about perfection. And yes, we may be told, oh, perfect is impossible. And yet, for every time we hear that, we get 1,000 messages that we have to have all the answers, we have to have everything figured out, or we can't try. And so
do you feel like that's definitely a real serious female trait versus a male trait?
I do.
Because I
think it's more serious with females, but I see it more and more with men.
Well, because in our society right now, it's really hard to find your place where you are, regardless. You know, I think the issues that probably were unique to women have expanded into women and men because there's just a tremendous amount of confusion in so many areas today, and that's where courage really comes in to like find your space and claim your space.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's a beautiful way of saying that. And it isn't about letting somebody give you a space.
Right.
And waiting,
it can't be.
Right? And that's really, I mean, Catherine Switzer is an amazing example of this. You know, when you think about her Boston Marathon run, and I don't know if everybody's familiar with the story, but she's the first woman to run the Boston Marathon. It was already a very elite, prestigious race. And I think this was like 1967. And like another woman had sort of snuck in to the race. And Catherine did not put her gender on her bib and was given a bib and so therefore given access. And she did happen to be wearing a baggy sweatshirt that sort of disguised her gender. And mid-race, she took off the sweatshirt and it became very clear that a woman was running the race. And women were fiercely prohibited. And literally, the race director tried to physically rip her out of the race.
Oh! And I know that story, but I still am shocked when I hear it. Yeah.
Bonkers. And literally, the only reason she was able to continue was because she had a team of support. And she had her boyfriend and her coach who knocked down the race director and allowed her to continue on, and literally had to fight off resistance physically on her behalf, which is a really great example of the U in this framework, which is U stands for Unite with Allies and Amplifiers.
Oh, so, great metaphor.
Or
acronym, or whatever right word that was.
The successful women.
At the same time.
I know. It all blends together for me too. The successful people don't go it alone, right? And we fetishize independence so much. And yes, feeling a sense of agency in our lives is really important, but that can't be confused with independence and the value of having the courage to let somebody else help you is so underinvested in. And it is scary, right? Like, let's say you have a big idea. Well, there's always a fear. Actually, another story here that I think does a great job of explaining this. Junie Changju, she's an amazing woman that I interviewed. She grew up in this teeny tiny village in China without electricity. She heard this story of another girl in another tiny village who had gone to college. Well, no woman in their village had ever gone to college, but Jenny got this idea from this other woman, and so she went to college in Beijing, in the city, already pretty radical there. She met this guy. They fell in love. They moved to America. She doesn't speak a word of English, but she becomes a nanny for a family that has a toddler or a baby that doesn't yet speak English. So she learns English alongside the baby. She reads a profile of Vera Wang and is like, oh, that woman's a designer. I like design. My grandma worked in textiles. Maybe I should be a designer. She's so amazing. She looks around at the library to understand how to apply to FIT, because that's where Vera Wang went. She learns she has to submit a portfolio, so she goes and she back to the library. She figures out what a portfolio is. She makes a portfolio. She applies. She gets into FIT. She builds this massively successful startup just on the backs of her own brains and drive and deep passion. She finds a business partner. They join hands in this business. And one day she walks into the office and he says, sorry, you have to leave or be arrested because there was a tiny little clause in our contract that allows me to take complete control of your business. Like, awful. The worst. She was deeply betrayed, deeply disappointed, went through some very long seasons of sort of regrouping and picking herself back up and ultimately rebuilding. And now I think her business, Lush Home Decor, is valued at over $100 million.
Okay, so pause there, right? because that is a perfect place for us to pause for our break for our sponsor, but you're keeping me on pins and needles, and I know everybody else is too. But if we didn't have our sponsor, would not have the courage to continue the show.
I like it. Cliffhanger.
So, Jen, take us away.
All right. We want to say thank you to legalstepz.com, LEGALSTEPZ. That's with a Z.com. They are the proud sponsor of the Ask Brien show. And I'm listening to these lovely ladies discuss, taking that first step and being brave when it's time for you to make that big decision. You've had this really cool idea for months, maybe years, and people have been telling you, oh my gosh, you need to start a business. You're really good at XYZ. Stop thinking about it and just do it. And the easiest way to really make that first step, no pun intended, is with legalstepz.com. So the courses are under $150. Super affordable. I know everybody's tight on money. I get it. This is kind of a crazy time right now, but really, you're going to let $150 get in the way of what you've always wanted to do? No, you're not. You've got this awesome idea. drop that $150 on any one of these 3 courses. You can take a course, how to register a trademark, how to form an S corporation, how to form an LLC. And as you're taking these courses, I took one a little while ago just to kind of get a feel for what it was. You are really just kind of following along with an expert, and you can see what they're doing. So you know that you're answering these questions the right way, because there was a couple, I'll admit, that were like kind of confusing, a little bit of legalese, and I thought, oh gosh, I hope I'm doing this the right way. I knew that I was, because I've got my expert there like a screen, and I could see what they were doing, and I thought, cool, that's the answer to that question. Moving on. I really liked it also that I was able to work at my own pace. Everyone's busy. You've got kids and spouses and jobs and dogs and houses and all of that. You don't want to be working on someone else's schedule. You want to work at your own schedule. So with that one course that I took, I was able to knock it out in less than 2 hours. I could pause it, rewind it, take notes. It was really just kind of, could not have been easier. If you get to the point where it isn't easy and you're stuck and confused and getting frustrated, just don't. Let the experts at Legal Steps handle it for you. They have over 30 years experience. Again, legalsteps.com, legalstepz.com.
I love that. And you're right. Courage is the first step, but also knowing how to handle the legal things is important as well, because you don't want to take that first step and fall off a cliff.
Yeah, really.
All right. So you left us with $100 million business.
That's all. So she rebuilt it. And I think anyone who had been through what she had been through would be very wary to enter another partnership, to allow someone to support her and help her business go to the next stage of growth. And yet, last year, she brought on a new CEO to lead this company to its next level of growth. And I hear in her story, I think, one of the greatest acts of courage that I've ever heard in these episodes. And it's really because despite hurt, despite disappointment, with a clear view of what can go wrong, she said, yeah, I know I can't do this alone. I know I can do this bigger and better and more impactfully with some support from other people who know things that I don't know, who believe in what I believe in. And so that is you. Unite with allies and amplifiers. And I think both those words are really important, because the allies really are the people who see what you see and want to help solve the problems that you want to solve. But the amplifiers too, like the courage to let somebody else, I'm going to stick with the baby metaphor, let somebody else raise your baby with you or for you even, takes a tremendous act of courage. And not trying to hold it all so closely, because I think control is a fear-based decision. And it's understandable, we all have them. But if we're going to really live and lead with courage, I think we have to allow ourselves to cede control.
So much good stuff there.
I know. I feel like I want to get a tattoo of these on my arm to remind me, because they all take a lot of work. R is releasing the offers to the world, and this is the one when we were talking about, you have to tell people that you want something. And, I think you hear it all the time, people who play really small. And they're playing small because they're afraid of judgment and rejection.
Yeah. No, I mean,
right?
Been there, done that. Every one of these courage breakdowns you're providing today, I feel like you're talking about, like I'm resonating with every single one of them, because I feel like they're like you're looking and peering into my brain and my soul.
You've learned this stuff though through experience, and I'm glad you relate to them, and I'm glad they sound familiar, because it's not like this stuff is bad. We're not bad because we have fears. We're not bad leaders or bad entrepreneurs. Rather, I think knowing where fear is limiting us and giving a name to how we can live and lead with more courage, that just empowers us to acknowledge that the fear is there and to take forward steps anyway. And for me, this is the one I get to practice the most, honestly, is the R, the release your offers to the world, because I every day dare myself, and I don't know if anybody wants to join me in this, let me know. I'm trying to do it on my Substack with folks. I like want a text chain where I can just text a bunch of women and be like, okay, I did it. I said something out loud today. Because every day I'm daring myself at least once a day to tell somebody something bravely. And whether it's sending that email, inviting somebody to a meeting or to be a guest or to collaborate, or following up with the person I wrote who didn't respond, right? Like all of that, releasing our ideas, our desires into the world. I think every single one of those takes courage, but every time we practice a little more courageous, once felt scary, now feels easy and baseline. This one is...
Okay, well, we're going to have to pause you because we have to just those pesky little commercial breaks. They just keep interrupting our courageous conversation. But you are listening to KHTS 98.1 AM 1220 and AM 1220 and HometownStation.com. Welcome back to the Ask Brien radio show on KHTS FM 98.1 AM 1220 and HometownStation.com. I swear in all the years that I've been doing the Ask Brien radio show, this is the fastest hour I have ever had with a guest. Aransas, I can't believe it. So we still have some pieces of the framework left, and I want to make sure we get to those. But before that, most importantly, this content is so fantastic. How can people get in touch with you? How can they get involved with that Substack, listen to that podcast? People need more of you in their world. How can they make that happen?
Oh my gosh, thank you. This has been so much fun. So the best place to check out all of our stories, I've actually just created a whole glossary of them so that you can find the ones you're looking for on demand, is at theuplifterspodcast.com. That is my Substack. And so every week there, I publish inspiring stories, tips, techniques for really building our mindsets and our courage capital so that we can keep doing big, brave things. But you can also find all of our stories there. And each and every one of them is so inspiring. And collectively, I think they really prove to us that even in a time where things may feel pretty hopeless and difficult, that hope is abundant and that we all really can create and be the change that we're looking for in the world. And these women are here to prove it to you.
Yes. So in these next 90 seconds that we have together, finish out the framework for us and so that we can complete the circle.
You got it. A is alchemize your struggles into strengths, and instead of letting our challenges define us, transforming them into our most meaningful work. And instead of those things breaking us, just turning them into breakthroughs. G is granting ourselves permission to speak our truth, to speak up about problems and possibilities, even when it's uncomfortable. It's about courageous communication. And then finally, E. And that is about taking good care of ourselves. That doesn't have an E in it. I call it established renewal practices. And this really is the thing that makes everything else possible. Consistent self-care is at the heart of all of these people's success. It's not a reward for finishing. It's fuel for the journey. And if you're looking for a story on that one, go listen to Ali Schroeder. She was the first female baseball player in Canada, and she's a wildfire fighter in Canada. So if anybody has had to learn the power of self-care, it's Ali.
Oh, my goodness. I am just uplifted by this interview, and I know our audience is too. And I appreciate you. I appreciate you in my life. I appreciate you in my business, and I have appreciated you taking the time to be with our audience today. Thank you so much, Aransas. You've been listening to KHTS FM 98.1, AM 1220. Oh, shoot. I was hoping to get through it without coughing. And I'm Jay Stelzner.com. Oh, my God.